Welcome in the forest on the branch. Today we're gonna continue reading what was that? Hyperion. Each new day 104. Each new revelation adds to my confusion. The absence of children here has bothered me since the first day in the village. Looking back through my notes, I found frequent mention of it in the daily observations I have dictated to my comlog, but no record of it in the personal mishmash here that I call a journal. Perhaps the implications were too frightening. To my frequent and clumsy attempt at piercing this mystery, the 70 have offered their usual enlightenment. The person questioned smiles, offered the usual enlightenment. Shit, it looks nice, but it's not very practical. To my frequent and clumsy attempt to piercing this mystery, the 70 have offered their usual enlightenment. The person questioned smiled beatifically and responds in some non-sequitur that would make the bubble of the Websworth village idiot seem like sage aphorism in comparison. More often than not, they do not answer at all. One day I stood in front of one I have tagged as Dell, stayed there until he had to acknowledge my presence and asked, "Why are there no children?" "We are the 70, he said softly. "Where are the babies?" No response. No sense of evading the question, merely a blank stare. I took a breath. "Who is the youngest among you?" Dell appeared to be thinking, wrestling with the concept. He was overmatched. I wondered if the Bikura had lost their time sense so completely that any such question was doomed. After a minute of silence, however, Dell pointed to where Al was crouched in the sunlight, working with his crude hand loom, and said, "There is the last one to return." "To return?" I said. "From where?" Dell stared at me with no emotion, not even impatience. "You belong to the cruciform," he said. "You must know the way of the cross." I nodded. I knew enough to recognize that in this direction lay of the many conversational logic loops that usually derailed our dialogues. I hunted for some way to keep a grasp of the thin thread of information. "Then Al," I said and pointed, "is the last to be born to return, but others will return?" It was not sure that I understood my own question. How does the inquire about birth when the interviewee has no word for child or no concept of time? But Dell seemed to understand. He nodded. Encouraged, I asked, "Then when will the next of the 70 be born, return?" "No one can return until one dies," he said. Suddenly I thought I understood. "So no new children. No one will be returned until someone dies," I said. "You replace the missing one with another to keep the group at 70? Dell responded with the type of silence I had come to interest as assent. The pattern seemed clear enough. The Bikura were quite serious about their 70. They kept the tribal population at 70, the same number recorded on the passenger list of the dropship that crashed here 400 years ago. Little chance of convenience there. When someone died, they allowed a child to be born to replace the adult. Simple. Simple but impossible. Nature and biology do not work that neatly. Besides the problem of minimum herd population, that were other absurdities. Even though it is difficult to tell the ages of these smooth-skinned people, it is obvious that no more than 10 years separate the oldest from the youngest. Although they act like children, I could guess their average age to be in the late 30s or mid 40s in standard years. So where are the very old? Where are the parents, aging uncles and unmarried aunts? And at this rate, the entire tribe will enter old age at approximately the same time. What happens when they all pass beyond childbearing age and it comes time to replace members of the tribe? The Bikura lead dull, sedentary lives. The ancient and the accident rate, even while living on the very edge of the cleft, must be low. There are no predators, the seasonal variations are minimal, and the food supply almost certainly remains stable. But granted all this, there must have been times in the 400 years history of this baffling group when disease swept the village, when more than the usual number of wines gave way and dropped citizens into the cleft of where something caused that abnormal cluster of sudden deaths that insurance companies have dreaded since time immemorial. And then what? Do they breed to make up the difference and then revert to their current sexless behavior? Are the Bikura so different from every other recorded human society that they have a returning period once every few years? Once a decade? Once in a lifetime? It is doubtful. I sit here in my hut and review the possibilities. One is that these people live very long lifetimeless and can reproduce during most of that time, allowing for simple replacements of tribal casualties. Only this does not explain their common ages, and there is no mechanism to explain any such longevity. The best anti-aging drugs the hegemony has to offer only manage to extend an active lifetime a bit over the 100 standard years mark. Preventive health measures have spread the vitality of early middle age well into the late 60s, my age, but except for clonal transplants, bioengineering, and other perks for the very rich, no one in the world web can expect to begin planning a family when they are 70 or expect to dance at their 110th birthday party. If eating cholma roots or breathing the pure air of the Pinyon Plateau had a dramatic effect on retarding aging, it would be sure bet that everyone on Hyperion would be living here munching changma, that this planet would have had a forest Farcaster centuries ago, and that every citizen of hegemony who had a universal card would be planning to spend vacation and retirement here. No, a more logical conclusion is that the Bikura live normal length life, have children at normal rate, but kill them unless a replacement is required. They may practice abstinence of birth control, other than slaughtering the newborn, until the entire band reaches an age where new blood will soon be ended. A mass birthing time explains the apparent common age of the members of the tribe. But who teaches the young? What happens to the parents and other old people? Do the Bikura pass along the rudiments of their crude excuse for a culture that then allowed their own deaths? Would this be a true death? The rubbing out of an entire generation? Did the 70 murder individuals at both ends of the bell-shaped age curve? This type of speculation is useless. I am beginning to get furious at my own lack of problem-solving skills. Let's form a strategy here and act on it, Paul. Get off your lazy Jesuit ass. Problem: how to tell the sexes apart. Solution: cajole or coerella a few of those poor devils into a medical exam. Find out, cajole or coerce a few of these poor devils into a medical exam. Find out what all the sex role mystery and nudity taboo is about. A society that depends upon years of rigid sexual absence for population control is consistent with my new theory. Problem: why are they so fanatical about maintaining the same 310 population that the lost dropship colony started with? Solution: keep pestering them until you find out. Where are the children? Keep pressing and poking until you find out. Perhaps the evening excursion down the cliffs is related to all of this. There might be a nursery there, or a pile of small bones. What is the belong to the cruciform and way of the cross? Business if not a contorted vestige of the original colonist religious belief? Find out by going to the source. Call their daily descent down the cliff by religious in nature? What is down the cliff face? Go down and see. Tomorrow, if their pattern holds true, all 310 of the 310 will wander into the woods for several hours of foraging. This time I will go with them. This time I am going over the edge and down the cliff. Day 105, 9:30. Thank you, O Lord, for allowing me to see what I have seen today. Thank you, O Lord, for bringing me to this place at this time to see the proof of your presence. 11:25. Edugar, Edugar, I have to return to show you all, to show everyone. I've packed everything I need, putting the imager discs and film in a pouch I wove from Besta's leaf. I have food, water, the master with its weakening charge, tent, sleep rods. If only the arrestor rods had not been stolen. The Bikura might have kept them. No, I've searched the hovels and the nearby forest. They would have no use for them. It doesn't matter. I leave today, if I can. Otherwise, as soon as I can. Other guard. I have it all here on the film and disc. 1400. Right, this is the time. 14. It is 14. There is no way through the flame forest today. The smoke drove back even before I penetrated the edge of the active zone. I returned to the village and went over the hollows. There is no mistake. The miracle is real. 530. 1530. 3:30. The 310 will return any moment. What if they know? What if they can tell by looking at me that I have been there? I could hide. No, there is no need to hide. God did not bring me this far and let me see what I have seen only to let me die at the hands of those poor children. 4:15. The 310 shit. The 310 returned and went to their huts without giving me a glance. I sit here in the doorway of my own hut and cannot keep from smiling, from laughing and from praying. Earlier I walked to the edge of the cleft and said Mass and took communion. The villagers did not bother to watch. How soon can I leave? Supervisor Orlandi and Took had said that the flame forest has fully active for 3 local months, 120 days. Then relatively quiet for 2. Tuk and I arrived here on day 87. I cannot wait another 100 days to bring the news to the world, to all of the worlds. If only a skimmer would brave the weather and flames forest and poke me out of here. If only I could access one of Datafix's SADs that serve the plantations. Anything is possible. More miracles will occur. 10 to midnight. The 70 have gone down into the cleft. The voices of the evening wind hoar, are rising all around. How I wish could be with them now, there below. I will do the next best thing. I will drop to my knees here, near the cliff edge, and pray while the organ notes of the plantant and sky sing that I know that is a hymn to a real and present God. Day 106. I awoke today to a perfect morning. The sky was a deep turquoise. The sun was a sharp, blood-red stone set within. As I stood outside my hood, and as the mists cleared, the arboreals ended their morning screech concert, and the air began to warm. Then I went in and viewed my tapes and discs. I realized that in yesterday's excited scribblings I mentioned nothing of what I found down the cliff. I will do so now. I have a disc, film tapes, and camlog notes, but there is always the chance that only these personal journals will be found. I lowered myself over the cliff edge, and approximately 7:30 yesterday morning, the Bikura were all foraging in the forest. The descent of wines had looked simple enough. They were bound
delivery.
But as wines and look simple enough, they were bound around one another sufficiently to create a sort of ladder in most places. But as I swung out and began to let myself down, I could feel my heart pounding hard enough to be painful. There was a sheer 3,000-meter drop to the rocks and river below. I kept a tight grip on at least 2 wines at all times and centimetered my way down, trying not to look at the abyss beneath my feet. It took me the better part of an hour to descend the 150 meters that I am sure the Bikura can cover in 10 minutes. Eventually I reached the curve of an overhang. Some vines trained away into space, but most of them crawled under the sheer slab of rock toward the cliff wall. 30 meters in. Here and there the vines appeared to have been brained to form crude bridges upon which the Bikura probably walked with little or no help from their hands. I crawled along these brained strands, clutching over vines for support and uttering prayers I had not said since my boyhood. I started straight ahead as if I could forget that there was only a seemingly infinite expanse of air under the swaying, creaking stands of vegetable matter. There was a broad ledge along the cliff wall. I allowed 3 meters of it to separate me from the gulf before I squeezed through the vines and dropped 2.5 meters to the stone. The ledge was about 5 meters wide, and it terminated a short distance to the northeast where the great mass of the overhang began. I followed the path along the ledge to the southwest and had gone 20 and 30 places before I stopped in shock. It was a path worn out of solid stone. Its shiny surface had been pushed centimeters below the level of the surrounding rock. Farther on, the path descended a curving lip of ledge to a lower, wider level. Step had been cut into the stone, but even these had been worn to the point that they seemed to sag in the middle. I sat down for a second as the impact of this simple fact struck me. Even 4 centuries of daily travel by the 70 could not account for such erosion of solid rock. Someone or something had used this path long before the Bikura colonists crashed here. Someone or something had used this path for millennia. I stood and walked on. There was little noise except for the wind blowing gently along the half-kilometer wide cleft. I realized that I could hear the soft sound of the river far below. The path curved left around a section of cliff and ended. I stepped out onto a broad apron of gently descending stone and started. I believe I made the side of cross without thinking. Because this ledge ran due north and south for 100-meter cut of cliff, I could look due west along a 30-kilometer slash of cleft to open sky where the plateau ended. I realized at once that the setting sun would illuminate this slab of cliff wall under the evening overhang each evening. It would not have surprised me if, on the spring or autumn solace, Hyperion's sun would, from this vantage point, appear to set directly into the cleft, its red sides just touching the pink-toned rock walls. I turned left and stared at the cliff's face. The worn path led across this wide ledge. 2 doors curved into the vertical slab of stone. No, these were not merely doors, they were portals, incently carved portals with elaborate stone casements and lintels. To either side of these twin doors spread broad windows of stained glass, rising at least 20 meters towards the overhang. I went closer and inspected the facade. Whoever had built this had done so by widening the area under the overhang, slicing a sheer, smooth wall into the granite of the plateau, and then tunneling directly into the cliff face. I ran my hand over the deeply cut folds of ornamental carving around the door. Smooth. Everything has been smooth and worn and softened by time, even here, hidden away from most of the elements by the protective lips of overhang. How many thousands of years had this temple been carved into the south wall of the cleft? The stained glass was neither glass nor plastic, but some thick, translucent substance that seemed as hard as the surrounding stone to the touch. Nor was the window a composite of panels, the colors swirled, shaded, melded and bended into another like oil and water, into another like oil on water. I removed my flashlight from the pack, touched one of the doors and hesitated as the tall portal swung inward with frictionless ease. I entered the vestibule, there is no other word for it, crossed the silent 10-meter space and paused in front of another wall made from the same stained glass material that even now glowed behind me, filling the vestibule with thick light of 100 subtle hues. I realized instantly that at the sunset hour the direct rays of the sun would fill this room with incredibly deep shaft of color, would strike the stained glass wall in front of me, and would illuminate whatever lay beyond. I found a single door, outlined by thin, dark metal set into the stained glass stone, and a pass through it. On Passam we have, the best we could from ancient photos and hollows, rebuild the Basilica of St. Peter's exactly as it stood in the ancient Vatican, almost 700 feet long and 450 feet wide. The church can hold 50,000 worshippers when His Holiness says Mass. We have never had more than 5,000 faithful there, even when the Council of Bishops of all the worlds in the assembly every worthy 3 years. In the central apse near our copy of Bereni's throne of St. Peter's, the great dome rises more than 130 meters above the floor of the altar. It is an impressive space. This space was larger. In the dim light, I used the beam of my flashlight to ascertain that I was in a single great room, a giant hall hollowed out of solid stone. I estimated that the smooth walls rose to a ceiling that must be only a few meters beneath the surface of the crack where the Bikura had set their hoods. There was no ornamentation here, no furniture, no sign of any concession to form or function except for object that sat squarely in the center of this huge echoing cave of a room. Centered in the great hall was an altar, a 5-meter square slab of stone left when the rest was hollowed out, and from this altar rose a cross, 4 meters high, 3 meters wide, carved in the old style of the elaborate crucifixes of old earth. The cross faced the stained glass wall as if awaiting the sun and the explosions of light that would ignite the inlaid diamonds, sapphires, blood crystals, lapis bread, queen's tears, onyxes, and other precious stones that I could make out in the light of the flashlight as I approached. I knelt and prayed. Shutting off the flashlight, I waited several minutes before the eyes could discern the cross in the dim smoky light. This was without a doubt the cruciform of which the Bikura spoke, and it had been set here a minimum of many thousands of years ago, perhaps 10 of thousands, long before mankind first left Earth, almost certainly before Christ thought in Galilee. I prayed. Today I sit out in the sunlight after reviewing the holodiscs. I have confirmed that I barely noticed during my return up the cliff after discovering what I now think of as the basilica. On the ledge outside the basilica there are steps descending farther into the cleft. Although not as worn as the path leading to the basilica, they are equally intriguing. God alone knows what other wonders wait below. I must let the world know of this find. The irony of my being the one to discover this is not lost on me. If it had not been for Armagast and my exile, this discovery might have waited more centuries. The church might have died before the revelation could have brought new life to it. But I have found it. One way or the other, I will leave or get my message out. 107. I am a prisoner. This morning I was bathing in my usual place near where the stream drops over the cleft edge when I heard a sound that looked up to see the Bikura I called Del staring at me with wide eyes. I called a greeting, but the little Bikura turned and ran. It was perplexing. They rarely hurry. Then I realized that even though I had been wearing trousers at the time, I had undoubtedly violated their nudity taboo by allowing Del to see me naked from the waist up. I smiled, shook my head, finished dressing and returned to the village. If I had known that I awaited me there, I would not have been amused. The entire 10 stood watching as I approached. I stopped a dozen paces from Al. Good morning, I said. Alpha pointed at half a dozen of the Bikura, lunged towards me, seized my arms and legs, and pinned me to the ground. Beta stepped forward and removed a sharp-edged stone from his or her robes. As I struggled in vain to pull free, Beta cut my clothes down the front and pulled apart the shreds until I was all but naked. I ceased struggling in the mob pressed forward. They stared at my pale, white body and murmured to themselves. I could feel my heart pounding. I am sorry if I have offered your laws, I began, but there is no reason. Silence, said Alpha, and spoke to the tall Bikura with the scar on his palm. Oh shit, my ass hurts from that, but it's actually, I don't know, I'm still gonna read a bit. Let me explain how I'm here. The cross must die the true death, said Beta, and the crowd shifted forward. Many had shaped stones in their hands. Those not of the cruciform must die, the true death, said Beta, and her voice held the tone of the I followed the cross. I cried out as the crowd took me to my feet. I grabbed at the crucifix that I hanged around my neck and struggled against the pressure of many arms. Finally, I managed to lift the little cross over my hand. Alpha held up his hand and the crowd paused. In the sudden silence, I could hear the river 3 kilometers below in the cleft. He does carry a cross, said Alpha. Dale pressed forward. But he is not of the cruciform, I saw. It was not as we thought. He is not of the cruciform. There was murder in his voice. I cursed myself for being careless and stupid. The future of the church depends upon my survival, and I had thrown both away by beguiling myself into believing that the Bikura were dull, harmless children. Those who do not follow the cross must die the true death, repeated Beta. It was a final sentencing. Stones were being raised by 70 hands when I shouted, knowing that I was either my last chance or my final condemnation. I have been down the cliff and worshipped at your altar. I followed the cross. Alpha and the Bob hesitated. I could see that they were wrestling with this new thought. It was not easy for them. I followed the cross and wished to be of the cruciform. I said as calmly as I could, I have been to your altar. Those who do not follow the cross must die as through death, called Gamma. But he follows the cross, said Alpha. He has prayed in the room. This cannot be, said Zed. The 70 prayed there, and he is not of that 70. We knew before this that he is not of that 70, said Alpha, frowning slightly as he dealt with the concept of past tense. He is not of the cruciform, said Delta 2. Those who are not of the cruciform must die through death, said Beta. He follows the cross, said Alpha. Can he not become of the cruciform? An outcry arose. In the general babble and shuffle of forms, I pulled against restrained hands, but their grips remained firm. He is not of the 70 and is not of the cruciform, said Beta, surrounding more puzzled than hostile now. He is that he should not die the true death. We must take the stones and open his throat, so that his blood flows until his heart stops. He is not of the cruciform. He follows the cross, said Alpha. Can he not become of the cruciform? This time silence followed the questions. He follows the cross and has prayed at the room of cruciform, said Alpha. He must not die the true death. All died the true death, said Bikura, whom I did not recognize. My arms were aching from the strain of holding the cruciform above my head. Except the 70, finished the anonymous Bikura. Because they followed the cross, prayed at the room, and become of the cruciform, say Alpha. Must he not then become of the cruciform? I stood there gripping the cold metal of the small cross and awaited their verdict. I was afraid to die. I felt a rage, but the larger part of my mind seemed almost detached. My greatest regret was that I would not be able to send out the news of the Basilica to an unbelieving universe. Come, we will talk of this, Beta said to the group, and they pulled me with them as they trod silently back to the village. They have imprisoned me here in my hut. There was no chance to try for the hunting master. Several of them held me down while they emptied the hut of most of my possessions. They took my clothing, leaving me only one of their rag wolves' robes to cover myself with. The longer I sit here, the more angry and anxious I become. They have taken my camlog, imager, discs, chips, everything. I have a single unopened crate of medical diagnosis equipment left at the old site, but that cannot help me. Document the miracle in the cleft. If they destroy the things they have taken, and then destroy me, there will be no record of the basilica. If I had a weapon, I could kill the guards. And, oh dear God, what am I thinking? Edgar, what am I to do? Edogar. And even if I'm survive this, make my way back to Keats, arrange travel back to Webb, who would believe me after 9 years absence from Payson because of the quantum leap time depth, just an old man returning with the same lies he was exiled for? Oh dear God, if they destroy the data, let them destroy me as well. Day 110. Alright, and I'm finishing here. We'll continue reading tomorrow. Thank you.